Hi, I'm Peter Buckle, and this is Design Office Hours, a podcast about design, designers, and careers in design. I talk about creating, leading, and navigating creative work at this place we call work. Whether you're a student, just starting out, or an established designer, welcome to this podcast. This show is also about your input, so send in your topics and questions, how to get in touch with me and the show. Email me, designofficehours@peterbuckle.com, type it, record it, AI voice type record it, and send it. And follow me on Instagram @designofficehours. Last but not least, head over to peterbuckle.com/designofficehours. I know, those are very long words, but I'm German after all. To sign up for my mailing list and to get notified about new episodes and other knowledge goodies and updates about me or this show. All right, let's get into it. What's on the menu for today? Today I have something slightly different. Plenty of Q&A, but today's Q&A is part of a talk that I gave to the Young Designers of India community. Young Designers of India is a community built by my friend, former colleague, and fellow designer, and generally very talented human being, Sushant Vohra, who has done a phenomenal job of pulling this whole thing up and bringing it into the world. And the output that this community is generating and facilitated by Sushant and his, I don't know, to me feels like lieutenants, is pretty phenomenal. So I followed this very closely on Instagram. And a while ago, we got together and thought of what would be a good topic to talk and share out to this community. Imagine a lunch and learn. And I settled on the topic of sharing thoughts about the future of design teams, or how I see these futures, multiple, eventually playing out, given certain signals, certain macro signals that we're eventually seeing, and how I eventually pick them up and interpret them. And then, of course, also what that means for talent, what that means for design tools, what that means for organizational setups. And at the end of this talk, which has a visual part to it that I will release at some point on my website, at the end of this talk, we had some really good Q&A going on with really nice questions ranging from tactical advice, how to do A and B, all the way across the spectrum to like questions that poke or point at bigger topics such as future of design, of course, future of tools. How will AI eventually play a role in this or not? Or what of the many roles it could play? And where do I see a lot of these macro topics heading eventually? So it was a really cool call facilitated by my friend Sushant. And without further ado, here's that part.
There's a lot of questions in the chat as well, and I appreciate the kind of questions because they're not like, oh, do you use AI or what software do you use? It's like real good stuff in there. I encourage everybody to continue posting questions because we're going to take them one by one. But before that, I get the privilege to ask the first question.
I'm going to unshare here so I can see this a bit bigger. Yeah, sure. Go for it. Shoot it.
Largely, there is a theme of designers being facilitators, sort of being the in-betweeners, making sure the dots are well connected. Who do you think is the best positioned for somebody or somebody who has to play this role? What are those skills? What is that knowledge that somebody has to acquire to be best positioned for being the facilitator, being the switchboard operator?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the last slide I had put up when I said I look a lot to design education, right? To shape that mindset and to shape that attitude. Now, it's not, is it a skill? So I think there's a two-pronged answer. One is the talent or the sort of baseline material that design schools in the past and maybe right now looked at what a candidate needs to have in order to be successful. I think that profile of a future student will change. It has to. Because a lot of these skills that are listed on the slide and kind of goes to your questions, they are rooted in like, you have to be good with humans, be a good communicator, right? You have to be able to learn and take on stuff quickly, synthesize it, and you don't have to become a mechanical expert in something, right? I don't know how the robot works in its full functionality, but I'm able to sort of dive in quickly, deep enough and understand it in order to understand the human on the other side. So I understand what this person wants, where they're coming from, what are they motivated. And I think being able to sort of play on that plane, that's a core thing. Is it necessarily something that you learn on your own? I don't think so. I think there's probably somewhere a base set of tools that's being developed, right, or trained. But I think it's also something. It's like you learn driving in driving school only so much. At some point, to become a good driver, you have to get out there. And I think there is a lot of that sort of on the job learning, which also points to another sort of skill if you want to lifelong learning and be constantly in a beginner's mindset. I think that is crucial. And I have seen that in younger generations of designers to be much easier. And I think it's because there's right now a lot more ambiguity introduced to our field. So call it readiness or just general mindset of like, well, yeah, I'll learn a new tool on the fly, no other problem. Now it turns out the new tools are also kind of easier to learn, I feel, right? It's not like unless it's SolidWorks, I still hate the software. But yeah, it's a great question. So I think design education ideally helps to pave the way here a lot. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good. Just sort of reading between the lines, and my own interpretation of that is that this, when you talk about the skill of differentiating between learning and the perception of learning is going to be super important. As you mentioned,
Right.
like you only learn so much in a driving school, but like if you're constantly fed that dopamine hit that you're learning something, especially with ChatGPT, you're writing something and then, whoa, I can communicate now, versus like actually learning how to communicate. I think that's going to be super important. I'm going to go through questions in the order they came in. There's a really good one, might be relevant to you as well, Peter. Weber was asking that, firstly, he's congratulating you on the great presentation. Then he says that he currently
Thank you.
leads the design system libraries team at Philips. And the question
Nice.
I have for organizational like mine, where we have hundreds of products and design teams, we have to deal with not only the silos of cross-functional partners, but also silos of different design teams in the organization, which I would assume is ID, interaction, service, etc. What do you think should be the right approach to improve transparency and cross-pollination between the multiple design systems to help the adoption of platform-level design? I think there's two
Wow.
questions there, right? Like one is the cross-pollination of the design system so that there's a holistic Philips design language, not the
Yeah.
design language, but like the language that everybody's speaking. And the second is just eliminating silos between design organizations.
Yeah. It's also loaded questions. Also, as a former Philips person, I have a soft spot for Philips people. I think part of so work, as I said earlier, working laterally across an organization is harder than working vertically, right? Information flow is easier up top, bottom top than sort of left to right. And I think part of a solution here is if you design systems, right? You design documentation. Don't design it for designers. Design it for the other people that are. I say, we build design systems, and sure, they're great to make decisions to drive efficiency and how do we, component libraries and all that stuff, right? It's great for designing something, but ultimately build also systems or build documentation around these things that are accessible to other parts of the organization and help to drive understanding, because I think that comes first. Yeah, I need to help to drive understanding on the other side. When we're talking about an industrial design language, designers talk to themselves far too often, right? And we love that because we feel so understood in the pain points as well as in the successes. But if you design design language for a hardware company, first thing you should do is go and talk to the engineers why this exists, right? This is not for designers' sake. This is for everybody to make decisions easier, to drive friction out, faster, efficient, but just to harmonize more. Obviously, we want to get to an aligned look and feel of user experience, digital and physical. So, and then the other part is processes, right? You can design process. You can use people or process to design certain mechanics into how you work. You do share outs. We have that, where we talk once, I think it's twice every 2 months. We sort of talk through everything we do. And I have run this in previous teams where we sort of like when the design team has once a month, we talk to ourselves, but it's sort of everybody can come and can listen in, right? So that engineers could come and say, oh, this is how the designers look at that. Also cross-functional team and design reviews. I think we do that shockingly few of them, right? Get people all together in a room. It's like a design review that is conducted just with designers. I don't know, what's the point? There's just, I think, very little value in everybody's time. It's good for like vibing with each other and okay, make this a Friday late afternoon exercise, but we have to be embedded in things. And then I think ultimately have your people being in the organization and being ambassadors for what you're doing, right? And I think there is a component that points to being in the same space. That makes that much easier. I hope that answers partly that pretty big question.
Yeah, awesome. Going to move on to the next one. And this is a question from Utsav. I'm going to summarize the question. Basically, he's asking, many companies use design thinking tools or workshops to improve team management and outcomes. Should these tools be acknowledged as design tools, and would that help involve designers more in these roles? So I think there's a two-part again. One is like these design thinking methodologies, is it worth calling them as important tools, especially in the future of design teams and future of design? And second, is there a world where designers need to facilitate these, or should the tools be replaced by actual people?
Well, I think so. So I'm not sure when we say tools, how physical, or when we say tools, we mean methodologies.
I would imagine yes, workshops, frameworks, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, workshops are run by people and are run by people who, you know, the term workshop has become such a weird one because it feels sometimes to me a meeting that's been held and somebody stood up and went on the whiteboard and drew a line. Suddenly it's called workshop. So I think we first have to redefine workshop and the value of such, right? I think good workshops where you really want to squeeze the juice, that is something you need to have a real person that is trained in facilitation. I mean, you can do it without, right? But I'm just saying that's why you get a lot of value out of this. So yes, I think the question points exactly to a part of the future that I sort of outlined, that designers are taking on a lot more of these roles of like, get everybody in a room. I'm not the expert in the material or only so much, but I'm an expert in like taking your ideas, amplifying them, working with them, making everybody less scared about ambiguity, right? Everybody relax, and also visualizing and translating this. And I think that's exactly right. That's, I think, where a lot of the value is going to be for designers. And again, I think future design education needs to take a stand on this. But in the meantime, it will ideally evolve organically into this. But it does require a little bit of like what type of person you are.
Sweet. All right, next one. I take great since Darshan is saying, I take great offense to the wording of neural design networks to be a de facto future. What then is your input as a design connoisseur and expert in making objects that succeed? Be it a fresher joiner of the career, or is someone like you who is an executive level decision maker? Is that question clear?
Wait, can you repeat the question? I'm not sure if I'm trying to find it in the chat, but I'm not seeing it.
If you scroll
there you go. I got it. Okay. That's what then is your input as a design connoisseur and expert in making objects? Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not an executive level. You're not the first one taking great offense, so that's great. I like that because that means we're onto something here. Because you're exactly right. There is a part that makes us uncomfortable, and it's just as networks. I don't think designers never wear. Well, when designers talking to designers, we romanticize, we nerd out on the connoisseur aspect of form, proportion, and that's all there. That's all table stakes, though, right? I think design in the context I'm describing it in larger organizations is going to be less and lesser about making objects and being in the nerdy craft corner of such. I think that will be still part of that, right? There's a group somewhere that takes care and does that. But design as an overall function, I think proportionally, right, in an organization will take a lot more will take care a lot more about the needs of the organization that are not about form, function, proportions, and sort of the classic thing. And in fact, I would go as far, if you as a designer has defined yourself so far about I render, I do CAD, I build pretty things. It's kind of a very narrow lens to look at design. Now, this is where design ultimately sort of started from, and it's still relevant, right? But as the design field is evolving, we're not just designing objects, we're designing systems, we're designing conversations, correlations, and we're going to be connoisseurs in such.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well said. I'm going to move on to the next one. This is, I think, relevant to a lot of us. Yaman is asking, hey, Peter, do you feel that the concept of skill and mastering a skill is going to disappear with the advent of AI? Considering how AI can make a bad sketch look good in seconds or render something really quickly without you having to learn Photoshop. It even writes stories and posts for you without having to learn concepts of good writing. Basically, these are things that take years to develop. So do you feel the skill of learning or the skill of mastering a skill is going to go away?
No, I don't think it's going to go away. It's just that the skill that you're mastering is going to change, right? So example, when Adobe Illustrator showed up, I don't know how many decades ago, the skill of hand illustration, it didn't disappear overnight, but it got devalued, right? In terms of, as I'm like going to pay an illustrator who sits there, handcrafts an illustration, or one of the new guys coming in and sort of starts to learn Illustrator, right? Now we kind of forget about this because we're at this cusp again, right? This time it's just, again, more fundamental. I'm sure in the old days, you ask somebody who did hand illustration, great pride, trained this for years, right? Suddenly there's this, okay, he comes in here, he learns Illustrator in 2 weeks and off he goes, and he's faster in more output. Oh, guess what? History rhymes right here. So I think, will you have to slave away in a future learning and crafting, CAD, learning all the million icons in SolidWorks? I hope for everybody involved, we will not have to do that anymore. And your sketch was never about looking pretty. It was always to communicate something. Pretty or not, my sketching is horrible. It's just good enough so that I can, somebody understands what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to translate what I'm trying to get out there, what we're trying to iterate on. If you render every sketch with your markers, that's not the right application of that skill that you have developed, right? It will find still its merit somewhere, but it will not be in the broad sense. So I know this is eventually unsettling that, like, yeah, I learned this for years and now there's a tool and somebody with no knowledge done, right? You don't have to be, in order to generate a visual, you don't have to be a painter anymore. You just have to be you have to be a storyteller, because now there's technology that has a radically low approach, threshold, language, and, well, in this case, typing, and a future maybe even verbalizing it directly to the machine. And that is just where it's going to go, right? There's nothing to be upset about it. It's just the mastering of skills. It will be different skills we have to master. And currently we are mastering these new tools, right? And you're right. There are certain aspects of learning, certain training aspects that are no longer relevant. That's not just prone to us or to this moment in time. It's always been the case, right? Imagine every car goes away from stick shift globally. Well, 10 years later, nobody knows how to drive a stick shift anymore. Guess what? It's no longer relevant because there's no stick shift anymore, right? So when we engage in these thoughts, like I always suggest zoom out a little bit, look at what's happening left and right, and then look at the core skills, right? Sushant, you mentioned it, like the ability to constantly learn, lifelong learner. I think this is going to be a lot more relevant. There is a generation, my parents' generations, right, where like I graduated, I went for this company, I worked all my life there, and I retired. That is a model from like past, right? Now it's like, well, I'm on my job number 6, 10, right? Now, currently I work in a company where people still make a career of like, I've been here for like 15 years. Okay, great, right? But I don't think that's the broader reality that we're going into. So lifelong learning, that's a skill I would master.
I think a related question to that, Peter, is which I think is probably one of the best ones here. Education also plays a major role in students feeling that their skills are what defines them as designers, because you go through like 4 to 5 years of design
Absolutely.
education.
Absolutely.
And Utsav is saying this needs to change majorly. The industry comes to all of us, or at some point, you get a giant slap from the industry, needing us to quickly work towards learning people skills. And of course, all the relevant skills. Inspire innovation in others more than being a solo player, things like that, right? Which I think most colleges do a fairly average to below average job at, or below average job at preparing for it. And he's just asking, what are your thoughts on that? And I think what I'm interested in, thoughts on design education shaping your perception of what a designer is.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that's part of the, well, I think it's part of the core problem that we're seeing right now, right? When we're in this transition phase where, new tools are approaching and they're not as mature and sophisticated enough, but our understanding of the ripple effects and how they relate and reform work is also not there. I think we're teaching design still, I don't want to say old school. I think we're not there yet, but we're teaching it as in like looking back what work required. And of course, a good university would get input from the field, would say, hey, what do you think is going to matter in the next 10, 15 years? So I think the question or the statement is bang on, that the current state of education, and I'm talking in like a zoomed out, almost sort of global manner, right? It varies a little bit. And we had a question about US-centric phenomena and trends. I think, but globally, yes, education, not just in design, anything, sort of, prones you and sets the expectations of okay, this is what this is about. Now you go to the first job and you're like, okay, this is only what this is half about. The rest I kind of have to relearn or I have to do. And that's also, part of reality. Design education gets you to the doorstep of your first job. And then from then on, it's university number 2. Depending on the job that comes after that, it's university number 3. And that is totally relevant. So, but I do agree. I see there's a gap widening, right? Where design education is sort of trying to reinvent, but doesn't really know how. And again, I'm generalizing. And then there is work that is sort of accelerating in its how it's changing, what's required. And the worst case is we're sort of widening this gap. I'm looking to design education, and Sushant, I'm super interested in that, right? Coming back and saying like, no, we're going to go ahead and we're looking at the trends that we need to see here in the future of work, and we're starting to teach this now. Now there is a little bit of the kind of business of education, right? Where like people, if you say design education or a study like, what is it, 3-4 years, I'm like, okay, how am I going to make money with this in year number 5, right? So there is, and I learned this not too long ago as I kind of started teaching and started working with universities a bit more. This sort of, I don't want to call it constraints, but the sort of thinking about, well, we're a business. People come here to pay for an education because they want to make a living with this in year number 5 after 4 years of studying, right? They're not coming here to study something that we tell them is like a trend in the future, right? Because I think most people, all people, we all struggle with grasping, okay, 10 years, 5 years. I mean, I struggle to think what I want to have for dinner. That's how far it goes, right? So it's an abstract topic, and there are probably not many people who sort of look at this and like, we need to change this now in order to be somewhat relevant, right? 10 years ago, people said, whatever you learn in school, most of the skills are not even relevant anymore when you enter the job. And I think that holds more than ever true, right? We heard the founder of NVIDIA a few months last year saying, don't go and put your kids in computer science, in programming, right? 15, 20 years ago, all the rage was like, get your kid programming as early as possible. Guess what? Programming, not a skill needed anymore. You talk to a machine, it will program for you. That's the reality. So I 100% agree. Education needs to kind of step up here, and we need probably that paradigm shift on that side as well.
Very cool. Let's do a couple more questions and then
I have time.
Okay, cool. Peter, before that, do you want to maybe quickly talk about your involvement in education and your relationship with the upcoming designers and what you're doing for the industry?
Yeah, I engage more and more with universities or design education where I can. On one side to learn, and in parallel to also apply my coaching here and there, right? But I'm just for it's a nerd topic for me, and I mean, you hear me speaking about it. And on the other hand, if I'm looking like, okay, where's the next level of impact you want to have on the field, right? Then I'm like, okay, design education. I just also like teaching, to be honest, and just working with the young folks. I find that I'm inspired by ideas usually, and just the potential of people. And I started on the side, sort of working on, putting it more, formalizing it. Okay, what do I think is the core structure of the future that I would teach? What is a design program? If I would design it for a young folk to kind of learn, study from, work through projects, what type of projects, what would I emphasize on? And obviously part of what I talked about finds its way in there. And that's kind of how I do this. I've been engaging with universities in India. In fact, next week, yeah, I'm teaching remotely a course for an IIT. It's a furniture design thing, and I've been to India like this year. I worked with a university called Rishihood, sort of scoping out a little bit what is a design course of a future, right? They're not all the same, right? There's like still universities lean here and there what they want to do. And it was super interesting. And I think especially in a country like India, where I'm super thrilled about, and it maybe goes towards that question we had in the chat, how much US centricity is in these trends. And I'll answer that later. But I think in a country like India, where you're kind of getting to the national stage, right? You're having a lot of economic growth. Like this generation has a lot different chances than their parents' generations had to make a life for themselves, to just reach a very different level of like economic value and security. I think you have a lot of sort of clean slate moments of like, I can define a lot here in terms of education, not just design, any field of education. But being a designer, obviously look at design education. So that's how I got involved. Probably will get more involved. Hope to be more involved. And yeah, I think
Yeah,
design education is
and
key.
the other fun tidbit is that you're also on our server as you're
That's right.
finding your way through Discord. There's going to be more opportunities to speak to Peter as well. All right, let's do a few more questions, guys. Like, if there's any thoughts that that are new based on what you heard Peter just talk about, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll go for maybe a few more minutes. But there's an important question which I think kind of needs addressing right now. Manas is asking, how can designers navigate and grow in less mature companies, less design mature companies on your hierarchy or like the stage
Yeah.
1, stage 2, stage 3? Especially large organizations that tend to use design as an accessory, which I guess is the lowest sort of category in your chart. And I think Manas is also speaking for a lot of companies from India that just do not have that exposure to design or to the second and third positions.
Yeah. I think it's a great question because a lot of designers work in big companies, but maybe even more work in sort of mid-sized and maybe smaller even, right? Now, sure, theoretically you can break a design maturity network is it 3, 5, 8 steps. You can break it down to a size of group of 5, right? But how much value is there? I would think to your question, I think if you're in a somewhat smaller company, I would look, well, what are the opportunities here? There's an opportunity being smaller. You eventually travel, so to speak, easier through the company, right? You're seen easier. You can have also more impact because the company is smaller. And we'll go to the accessory part of that. So networking across a company, building the relationships, being an advocate, being the ambassador for design, what you do, can be actually easier in a smaller company. I would agree though, you need a bit of critical mass, right? If you're in a 10-person company, yeah, that's probably, of course, you can still make an impact. And it's like, I'm not just taking care of shape. I can help you to think strategy. I can be, a ping pong player for like business relevant topics of how does your strategy ripple through all the way to the product level, right? How do we design? What processes? What manufacturing do we engage in? I'm using a physical example because that's a lot of money that goes into that stuff, right? And helping a founder, helping a smaller leadership team or a company of a smaller leadership team of a smaller company, helping them to sort of explain, okay, I kind of sketched out how this ripples through. This is what this might mean for engineering. I connected with the engineering folks, got a bit of input for them, right? And again, translating this, making this visual. I think that's something we often talk about, making things visual. I think we're still not doing it enough. It's ultimately we're analog human beings and we just love visuals because visuals is the closest to storytelling, unless somebody has a good speaker. And then the accessory part, well, that's where the work starts, right? That's pushing the ball up the hill. Like, okay, how do we ideally you have a good leader, you have a good design leadership somewhere that gets on a path and says, we're going to start expanding beyond our doors and show how we can have an impact that is not just beautifying, prettifying. That's like the old school world. No, in fact, stay relevant. Okay, let's try to get close to leadership, try to get into different decision-making meetings. And of course, though, as you sort of try to roll this out, you need buy-in from the top leadership somewhere. Otherwise, you're just killing yourself in the process, right? You only will get so far. Now, I don't think we will have chief of design officers in the future anymore as much as we had. Why this is a different conversation, but again, that's where we kind of go into networks and just infiltrate, so to speak, teams and the organization. But at some point, having buying from the highest level of like, yes, I see the value of design, being an advocate, right? That's your boss, your director of design. He's supposed to go there. He's supposed to work these ropes and say, here's how we can help you. Here's our tool set. Get us in a room. Give us a try. This is hard work. This is not an easy thing to do, and it takes years to build this. In a smaller company, though, coming back to this, it may not just take years. It can get a bit faster, right? Because things are all just a little bit more condensed, and hence, in that regard, communication might be a bit easier.
Peter, do you think that any company that's at the bottom side of the ladder, it is necessary for them to climb up the ladder, or do you feel it's okay to just be 3, 2, 1, whatever on the spectrum?
Excellent question. I think for a lot of companies, it's just fine, right? Yes, we call that out the ideal, but for a company, in order to be successful, it may just need design where it is right now. It's in this corner, it produces stuff, everybody's happy. That's it, right? For now, for the time being, right? We talk about longevity. So think of companies like organisms. They have their manners, they evolve, they throw their tantrums, but they can't, there's dynamic all the time. Organizations change all the time. Any element that is rigid over the course of 10 years, 5 years, 20 years, is probably going to be washed out somehow. And yeah, that's not every company has to reach that. Not every design team has to go there. Ideally, you're in stage 2 and you may not want to go all the way to stage 3. Maybe there's no need for it. But staying sort of alert of like, how do we have to transform as a design team, even in our current level where we are, right? How do we new tools to adopt, new design disciplines to hire, new networks to build? That's still relevant.
Super cool. Somewhat related question or stemming from this is a lot of younger designers, because of the image they have of the design world and the position that they'll be filling, they have certain expectations. And when those expectations are not met, or when they find their work to be fairly limited, or they find themselves to be super constrained in how far they can move the needle, there is a sense of frustration. There's a sense of being stuck. There's a sense of, am I not good enough? I'm wondering, in your practice, firstly, have you ever felt that? And second, how do you find purpose in your work or in your position, let's say, or in your job?
Let's call it field. Wait, there was a beginning of the question. So, the stuck part, right? If you feel like, it's like your own good career management, right? You apply yourself somewhere, your skills, you try it. and I'm probably simplifying this question here. If you feel you're not making the progress, you know, you have tried this now for long enough, we figure out what's the stupid line, how far do we go? We don't want to die on any hill. I always recommend don't die on any hill. It's not worth it. There are many more hills to climb and many more views to take in. So if you applied yourself as no progress for whatever reason, right? Could it be you're embedded in a design team and I don't know, growth is not happening. Maybe you're in the wrong place. Maybe this is just not your thing. Not that you're not a good designer. That's not your environment. Maybe it is your environment, but it's just not the people, right? Maybe this company would have been good for you 5 years ago, and right now where you are, what you need, right? There's a difference between what you want and what you need in your career when it comes to growth. Maybe that's not it. So maybe there's an element of like, okay, let's just take a bit of inventory and ask yourself, what am I doing? Is this the right thing for me? So I hope that goes towards this question. Now, there could be also you just simply looking at this and say, you know, I think we as a team, what I feel, I'm not alone in this, right? And maybe you can help suggesting the team to, I mentioned earlier, how does I think a design team always has to evolve. It's the spearhead of change. If it becomes brittle and stagnant, it will be rendered irrelevant or less and less relevant. So maybe it's about your role, defining your role and like, okay, I do my day-to-day work, but I'm also now developing an ear and sort of an edge for like, how do we as a team need to transform ourselves in order to have more impact to do this? And, you know, that's also a good way to kind of feel out a little bit your design leadership. How are they situated with change, right? How are they? They work more on the fringes of a design team, at least to the top. What's their sort of, have a temperature check on that. But long story short, if you feel like over time, hey, I'm not getting anywhere here, all right, maybe it's time for next level thinking. What do I need to do next in order to go further in my profession as a human, right? And what environment, what type of leadership do I need for this?
Awesome. I think that's a great ending note. Thank you all for joining. Peter is on the server. We want to do more of these. This was how I would put it as is an introduction to Peter. And as he's immersing himself into the Indian design scene, I ask of you that help him out, reach out to Peter. You know, if you have questions, is that okay with you, Peter?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm on this Discord server. I don't have the time to be there all the time, but hit me up there, send your questions. Just be patient.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. We'll continue the conversation, guys. Just a heads up, we're also having our monthly after dark, which if you guys don't know what that is, we just hang out on the server with a bunch of designers. So feel free to join, check out Discord. Peter, if you have the time, I know you probably have other stuff to do.
I actually participate. I was there a few times and got to talk. I don't know who was on it. I think he's in the chat. Somya, I think he was there. So I'm familiar with the after dark.
Okay, awesome. All right, with that, thanks, Peter. Thanks everybody for joining. Catch you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the weekend and thank you for having me.
And happy Diwali, everyone.
All right, that's it for today for Design Office Hours. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know where you want me to elaborate. Have follow-up questions. I'm happy to make this part of future episodes. Reach out via email, designofficehours@peterberkel.com. Head over to peterberkel.com/designofficehours to submit questions via the form and follow on Instagram. And of course, feel free to talk to me there too @designofficehours. So many ways to get in touch with this whole endeavor here. All right, until then, stay kind, stay curious, always.